This whole idea of primary emotions, they set the stage just like Big Amy and Small Hippo for everything else in this series coming up and understanding anxiety and depression and how to treat them. Today's episode is about primary emotions because it's one of the two foundations I wanted to cover before really getting into what anxiety and depression are all about and how to treat them. The last episode was about Big Amy and Small Hippo. That is a foundation to basically understand what happens in the brain from toxic stress. And today it's about primary emotions because anxiety and depression don't come out of nowhere. They happen for a reason, a biological reason shaped by evolution to tell us something. They come out of primary emotions. Now there's a difference of opinion in the scientific community about primary emotions. Do we have them? We don't. Are there 8, 6, 4? I'm going to say there are 4 based on the research I've seen and clinical evidence. But there has to be an emotional system in all humans, and it has to come from somewhere, and we all have the same basic emotional system. And it explains why you may feel anxiety and depression. And it's important to know that it doesn't come out of nowhere. There's nothing wrong with you. I keep saying that in my channels, but there isn't. You're feeling something you're supposed to feel. And then B, it helps you learn how to manage your emotions, to understand what they are and what they're all about. So primary emotions. So primary emotions are joy, fear, anger, and sadness. And, if life is fine, most of us feel joy most of the time, if not almost all the time. So don't think because there are 4 primary emotions, they're equally felt. They aren't. They happen in response to life. So for most of us going along, and not our entire lives, there may be times where there's a lot of fear involved, more fear involved, like the Big Amy I talked about in the previous episode, or there's more sadness involved, maybe like Small Hippo, or just things going wrong or lacking or losing things that you really, really care a lot about. So as we go along in life, we are experiencing these different emotions and what they mean to us. This came about because in my clinical practice for more than a couple of decades, at some point I realized that really people are experiencing either wellness or depression or anxiety or irritability or, actually, it's all the above. Most people feel and experience all the above. So if we're emotionally really challenged, it's usually not just anxiety. Usually that's the leading edge. But usually with it, I've noticed over a couple of decades, there's a lot of anxiety and there's some depression and some irritability or different amounts of each. That's the human experience, not just happiness, not just depression, not just anxiety. It's all the above. People I treat who really need a lot of help in terms of anxiety and depression still feel a lot of joy. Things happen throughout the day, throughout life. It really makes me happy. But other times, oh my God, I'm really down, or oh my God, I'm really anxious. So anyway, it's always the mixture. And that's why when I saw this article from researchers at the University of Glasgow in Scotland that said, there are 4 primary emotions: joy, fear, anger, and sadness. I said, aha! It was like one of those moments in time. You're like, whoa, there it is. That explains it. Now, they study facial expressions. They're not clinicians. They're not talking about mental health. They're talking about facial expressions. But the point is, they call them biologically basic. And everything else we talk about and experience and name is socially specific. But what's biologically basic are joy, fear, anger, and sadness. And it matches completely with my clinical observations of happiness or doing really, really well, or anxiety, or irritability, or depression. And so it's just like, there we go. And so I have based my practice on that ever since. And all this stuff and what I'm presenting in this anxiety and depression series is based on primary emotions, and they exist for a reason. They're biologically basis, and you know what? They're all good for us. That's a funky thing to hear, but they're all good for us. Fear is as equally as good for us as sadness and joy and anger, because we all need all the emotions to live well, to survive. For sure, talk about the lions on the savannah. We need a lot of fear and even anger to fight them off or fight off other animals or things. We need all of our emotions, you and I and everybody, to navigate life and to succeed in life. So don't think that fear and sadness or anxiety and depression is wrong. It's all right or correct. It's all the right thing going on for you. But we want to change your experience of anxiety and depression. So you simply feel fear and sadness at times. You're not generalized anxiety. You're not major depression. That we can change. That's like an enlargement. Generalized anxiety is an enlargement of the fear response, the human fear feelings. And depression is an enlargement of the sadness experience. Biologically speaking, we have 5 major senses, sight, sound, touch, smell, etc. And emotions are just like that. Our emotions are responses to our environment. Just like if you walk into a room and you smell some stuff, smelling is a response to your environment. And I know that sounds strange too, but it's that biologically basic, that biologically true. Also, primary emotions are like primary colors. They're like 3, 4, people argue, but primary colors, and all other colors are made from them. And that's the same is true for our primary emotions, is that all your emotions are made from the 4 primaries, mixing and matching. And, culturally and socially, we define things differently, we emphasize things differently. But everything is coming from those 4 basic emotions, those 4 primary emotions, just like colors. Also, I want to emphasize that from the science, because I use science in my practice and with you in this channel, that the Center for Anxiety and Related Disorders down at Boston University, I really follow what they've researched for decades and what they're doing. But they have this sentence which really matters to what we're understanding for anxiety and depression and relating to primary emotions. They say, at their core, all of these, or depressive or anxiety disorders, arise out of a tendency to experience emotions more frequently, more intensely, and as more distressing than someone without these disorders. So again, the idea is that we have primary emotions like fear and sadness, but life changes them to feel really strong, like really strong fear or really strong sadness. And that's when we want to step in and help you change that. If you're feeling really strong fear feeling like anxiety or a really strong sadness feeling like depression, we want to change that, and we can. We now know how to do that. All right, so just want to describe the joy response, all 4 responses, the joy response, and it really is it's joy feelings. Feelings of joy. I just use the word joy because it's just a general big area, but other words in the English language that mean the joy feeling or joy response are like ecstatic, happy, loving, energized, looking at my notes here, blissful, elated, all these different, I don't know how many words, just lots of words that relate to the joy feeling. Now looking to anger, the anger feeling, same idea, mad, disgusted, hostile, bitter, frustrated, outraged, annoyed, all sorts of words in the English language that describe the anger feeling or some amount of it, whether it's a stronger one or a weaker one, that we all have, you, me, and everybody. Fear, anxious, panicked, insecure, worried, scared, afraid, nervous, terrified, and stressed. Most of the time when we use the word I'm stressed, we're actually feeling a lot of fear feeling, a lot of fear response. And Stressed and anxious are interchangeable. So sometimes when we say stressed, we mean angry or some sort of anger feeling, but most of the time it's a fear feeling when we say stressed. All of our emotional responses are equally normal, equally healthy, and equally important. So basically, the joy feelings tell us to keep it. Whatever we're feeling great about, we want to keep it. It's a great thing. Someone we love, a home we love, and just keep it. Joy means keep it and enjoy it. But if we're feeling fear, a fear feeling or a sadness feeling or anger feeling, it means change. Change it, if you can. Like there's a lot of sadness when you lose someone like they die. You can't change that. And so you have to go through the grieving process, basically, in your sadness of losing that person. But otherwise, if you're feeling down and blah and discontented, kind of like in the sadness category, it means you don't have enough joy. It means get more joy. I know that sounds simple, but that's what it means. Because sadness really is either a loss of joy or a lack of joy. And it's really what it is. So fear, sadness, anger, all those feelings mean change it. Anger is like fight back. This is not good for you, and if you can, fight back. That's what the anger feeling, the anger response is all about, is to fight back. Also, our emotional responses in the four basic categories and families of emotions are of different strengths. Like there's a background feeling, and I'll use driving as an example. When you're driving down the road, you have a background feeling of sort of a fear feeling, because it's like it's just keeping you going down the road, And so it's just a background thing. You don't notice it. It's not very big. But let's say someone sort of like veers in front of you, and you're driving down the road. They kind of veer. Whoa! You get a stronger, quicker fear feeling, fear response when that happens. And then in my neck of the woods, it snows in the wintertime, and so we have snowy roads and sometimes really slippery. And I'm driving home. And it's like there's a lot of fear response keeping me really focused and going 25 miles an hour and making sure I don't slide off the road. Or what about that person coming at me? Are they going to slide into me? So it's a pretty steady fear feeling all the way home, right? So that's just an example of like background low and medium and high feelings that we have. Same for joy, same for anger, same for sadness. But that's a big part of understanding your emotional system and how it works, how it operates. Another thing to emphasize is that, believe it or not, we don't have emotional states. We do have a mood, and I'll talk about that next, but we have emotional responses. So if I'm going along and I'm feeling really, really anxious, situational anxiety, and then something changes either in my belief system or in my life, and suddenly I feel great, feel happy. So I'm not living in a state of anxiety. Generalized anxiety means sort of that you are, because you're like your fear response is so elevated because of Big Amy that everything that would normally cause these small fear responses cause big ones. So it feels like you're living in a state. Generalized depression with small hippo feels like a state because your emotional system is blunted, and so you just don't feel anything. So that feels like a state. So I get how we call those states of anxiety or states of depression. But they really are this combination of changes to the brain and emotional responses. But most of the time our life is like emotional responses to life, internally or externally, not states. Mood is like saying for the most part I'm feeling sad. Like 80% of the time, 70%, I'm feeling sad because I'm really lacking enjoyable stuff in my life. So that we typically call a mood. But in fact, it is a response. It's a continued response. And again, when something happens that is really joyful and happy, boom, we're snapped out of it. And maybe for a day, we're not feeling sadness at all. We're feeling great. So that indicates, it's a response thing, not a state and you're stuck in it. And that's the really important message to you is if you're feeling something, you're not stuck there. It's going to change with a new stimulus or something going on in your life. Or it's going to change because we're going to help you treat that and change it, or both. You're not stuck in any emotional place that you are. And there's help with things we call anxiety and depression, like I've been describing. In the world of psychotherapy and psychology and understanding, we have different things we follow, like cognitive behavioral therapy. It's like the main therapy that we use. And within cognitive behavioral therapy, there's this really basic thing, which is emotions are something you have. They are not who or what you are. Bingo. That's a big thing I want you to know about primary emotions. We all have these primary emotions. We have these other socially specific words we use for emotions, but they're not who we are. That's a big thing. We never really literally want to say, I am depressed. We want to say, I am feeling down. I am feeling sad. I am feeling some depression. Because when we believe we are the thing, like anxious or depressed, we make it worse. So we want to separate ourselves from that and not have those feelings of like, I am something. It's, I am feeling something. Again, going back to the Center for Anxiety and Related Disorders from Boston University, I want to read a quote from them again about this. It's really important. Because non-judgmental awareness is what is taught in mindfulness, and it's what is taught in a lot of therapists' offices, being like, okay, I'm aware of what I'm feeling and I don't judge it. But they say non-judgmental awareness means staying in touch with our experiences even when they are uncomfortable and accepting them as they are, letting reactions to them come and go without trying to reduce them, change them, or deem them good or bad, and without trying to run away from them. That's a really important sentence for understanding your primary emotions, your emotions as they occur. Just look at them and let them tell you stuff like, oh, keep this or change that. Do not be your emotions. Do not become your emotions. Know they are feelings that you have in response to your environment, and you're supposed to have them. There's nothing wrong with you. You're feeling what you're supposed to feel. That is a powerful realization right there. So just finishing up this whole idea of primary emotions, they set the stage, just like Big Amy and Small Hippo, for everything else in this series coming up and understanding anxiety and depression and how to treat them. Primary emotions, they exist for all of us. They're biologically essential. We must have emotional responses to life. They tell us what's going on. We are not our emotions. They're something that we're having or feeling. And everything is changeable if you don't like it, especially anxiety and depression. We can help you change that. We can treat that. So I hope this has been helpful because you deserve it and you are awesome.